Sometimes the strongest presence is the one that stays completely silent. Ever been in a room filled with noise, people shouting, opinions clashing, tension rising, and yet there's one person sitting calm and quiet, and somehow they stand out more than anyone else? That's not being weak. That's not being afraid. That is true power. There comes a moment in life when you understand that not everything deserves your reaction. Not every rude comment deserves your reply. Not every act of betrayal deserves your anger. Silence, real, steady, intentional silence, isn't the lack of talking, it's the presence of wisdom. Pain will try to drag a cry out of you. Haters will try to spark a reaction. People who let you down will want to see you fall apart. But when you choose silence, not as escape, but as control, you take your power back. You stop moving to their noise and start moving to your own beat. That's where growth begins. That's where you become untouchable. That's when people look at you and realize you're not quiet because you're scared. You're quiet because you've risen above it all. Because once you master silence, you start mastering yourself. Have you ever seen someone sit in the middle of madness and not even blink, not talk, not fidget, not react? They're not clueless. They're not lost. They've just learned something most people never will: the strength that comes from silence. While others shout, they breathe. While egos bounce around the room, they hold still. When silence is used wisely, it isn't weakness. It's power. It's a decision. It's protection. Wise people don't fight for attention. They are the attention. When they walk into chaos, they don't argue with the noise. They simply stand firm and let it pass. The world is hooked on reactions. One rude comment and people go off. Disagreement and voices get louder. But the wise, they've learned that not every fight is worth the energy. Not every fool needs to be schooled. Every moment requires a response. They protect their energy. They speak with purpose. And often, their biggest strength lies in staying quiet. Because silence can hit harder than shouting ever will. It shakes people up, makes them wonder what's going on in your head. That mystery, that calm, is the quiet power of someone who's grown. At a certain stage, you stop answering questions meant to trigger you. You stop replying to people who twist your words just to start a fight. You stop engaging in talks that only lead to more stress. That's when silence becomes your armor. Because you're hiding, but because you've learned that peace is more valuable than pride. That kind of control isn't easy. It hurts to stay silent when your name is dragged. It's hard to keep your cool when everyone expects you to lose it. But when you manage it, when you hold back and walk away, it feels like freedom. It feels like power. Because now, else controls your emotions. You do. And that changes everything. You begin to see how tiring it is to argue with ignorance. Useless it is to prove your worth to people who don't want to understand you. So you offer silence, not as a weapon, not out of spite, but as wisdom. Silence doesn't mean there's nothing to say. It means you know what's worth saying. It means I know my value. I don't need to explain it. And that kind of self-control, that level of quiet strength, is rare. The loudest person isn't always the most confident. In fact, it's usually the one talking nonstop who feels the most insecure. Real power doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't crave applause. It doesn't look for approval. Strength sits in silence and lets its presence speak. The wise have learned this the hard way, through hurt, betrayal, and moments where they gave too many explanations, offered too many chances, and got hurt every time. So now they speak less but mean more. They don't argue to prove a point. They live with purpose, and their actions speak louder than their words. When people push their buttons, they remain calm. Not because they're passive, because they're powerful enough to let foolishness destroy itself. When you choose silence, you stop playing games with people who just want to cause trouble. You stop walking into fights that steal your peace. You start walking away. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. They call cold or distant is really just self-respect wrapped in quiet strength. It takes courage to speak up. It takes even more courage to stay silent when words won't help. Not every situation needs your voice. Not every conflict needs your input. Staying silent doesn't mean you're blind. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about your well-being to protect your energy. People will push, test, and try to drag you down. And when you don't respond, they'll say you're arrogant, fake, or scared. Let them talk. Because the truth is, silence will confuse them more than any comeback ever could. When you stop reacting, they lose access to your feelings. They can't twist your mood anymore. That's when the control comes back to you. Silence helps you notice everything without getting pulled in. It gives you room to breathe, think, and make choices with clarity. And in that space, you grow, you rise, you turn into someone who doesn't get pulled into every fire. You learn how to be the calm that puts it out, not the spark that feeds it. There's a kind of silence that unsettles people, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they can't figure you out anymore. You used to argue, to fight to be heard, but now you just stay quiet. Now you let your boundaries speak. You let your actions speak. And that silence, this is everything. It says, I need to raise my voice to prove I'm right. I don't need to explain why I stepped away. I don't owe anyone my peace. The wise don't waste time on nonsense. They don't ask for respect. They walk away when it's missing. They let silence carry the message their words used to. And the more they do it, the lighter they feel. Because when you stop needing to reply to every insult, every rumor, every cheap shot, you've reached another level. You've built something solid inside. That's emotional strength. That's the kind of power silence creates, one moment at a time. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Not because you're empty, because you finally understand the strength in holding back. You realize silence protects your peace, guards your dignity, and lifts your spirit. It doesn't mean you're not hurt. It doesn't mean you're not angry. It means you've grown. It means you know your reaction is yours to control, and not everyone deserves to touch it. The wise know this. They've watched how noise can cover up the truth. They've seen how arguing leads nowhere. So, they choose silence not to hide, but to stay steady. They're not running. They're grounded. They don't need the last word. They've already won by keeping their calm. They don't need to call anyone out. Time will uncover what's real. And when everything settles, when the shouting stops, people get tired of talking. The one who stayed quiet will still be there, standing taller, stronger, and louder than ever, without saying a single word. A big difference between being quiet out of fear and being quiet out of mastery. Silence, when chosen with intention, becomes the greatest strength you can have. It's easy to speak when you're emotional. It's easy to lash out. But the one who pauses, who breathes back as if they're holding something powerful in their hands, that person is strong. That person is in control. Because silence doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're growing up. The world will try to pull you out of character. Someone will disrespect you. Someone will talk behind your back. And your ego will want to respond. If you can stay still, not let their mess drag you in, that's when you really begin to understand your strength. That's when you see that peace isn't something you chase. It's something you choose. Every time you stay silent instead of reacting, you're building yourself. You're proving to your emotions that they don't run you. You run them. And that kind of control, that kind of mastery, it's not fake. It's real. It's earned through struggle, patience, and deep presence. Ever notice how people who are really at peace don't argue with everyone? They don't chase gossip. They don't defend their name every time it's brought up. They stay quiet, not because they have to, but because they've reached a level where their energy is too precious to waste. That calm they have, it was built in the storm, in those moments where they could have screamed but chose silence instead. And now that stillness is their power. Because once you've fought the battles inside yourself, fear, anger, doubt. Outside noise doesn't shake you the same. You know what real chaos feels like, and you know that not every loud voice is a threat. Most times, silence is the strongest answer you'll ever give, are just distractions. So when someone tries to drag you into their drama, when they disturb your peace, answer becomes silence. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because what you might say isn't worth losing what you already have, your emotional balance. You experience that kind of calm you protected at all costs, because that quiet took years to build. And one careless reaction can tear it all down. There's something powerful about realizing you don't have to respond right away. You're not required to answer every call or message. You don't need to correct every wrong statement. That pause, that small space between your first impulse and your response, is where your power lies. In that moment, you find clarity. In that space, you remind yourself that no one is entitled to your peace. Emotional control isn't something you're born with. It's something you work on. And building it means learning how to sit with uncomfortable feelings. It means hearing painful words without letting them take over your spirit. It means letting people misjudge you, letting them form opinions, and still being sure of who you are. Because the truth is, some people will try to upset you just to knock you off balance. They'll say things they don't even believe just to get a reaction from you. But when you give them nothing but silence, it unsettles them. They don't know what to do with someone who won't play their game. That silence isn't cold. It's calm. It says, not giving my energy to chaos today. And that's a different kind of strength. It takes real bravery to stay calm when your heart is racing. It takes wisdom to stay quiet when you're boiling inside. But the more you choose silence, the more you learn that nothing outside of you deserves the power to disturb what's inside of you. That's how real strength is formed, not by winning arguments, by walking away from ones that cost your peace. You start to see that your reaction is a reward someone is looking for. They try to push your buttons, and if you react, they win. When you don't respond and you keep that energy for yourself, that silence becomes your win. It becomes the message that says, you can't shake me. And little by little, that self-discipline touches every part of your life. You grow more patient in hard times. You stay more focused when there's pressure. You become stronger when people hurt you. Because silence teaches you not just how to hold back your words, but how to hold on to your peace. It shows you that you can be in pain and still stay composed. That you can be misunderstood and still feel whole. That you can be triggered and still not hand over your power. That's not denial. That's strength. That's maturity, progress. When you begin to use silence on purpose, you begin to see clearly what's worth your energy and what's not. You stop wasting your time trying to fix what doesn't want to be fixed. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand. You stop chasing approval from those who never truly cared about your well-being. That's when your silence becomes sacred. It becomes your shield, your healing, your quiet confidence. You don't have to explain every choice. You don't have to speak every boundary. Let your silence speak for you. Let it mark your space. Let it be the quiet decision that keeps you from going back to what once hurt you. And the people who don't understand your silence, they were never meant to. Because silence isn't about cutting people off. It's about choosing yourself. It's about making space where your mind can rest and your heart can recover. It's about picking your own peace in a world that constantly pulls for your attention. And the more you choose that quiet, you take back control of your life, one still moment at a time. In time, you see that silence isn't just something you do. It becomes a way of life. It's not checking your phone the second you wake up. It's walking away from drama that once pulled you in. It's letting people say what they want without letting it ruin your mood. That silence becomes part of who you are. You're no longer reactive in the same way. You're no longer drained by the same cycles. You still notice things. You still feel deeply. But you don't let it control you anymore. You've outgrown the need to speak loudly, past the need to prove your point. Because now you understand. Silence speaks a powerful language, one only strong people truly get. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't try to explain. It simply exists. And that presence, that peace, that restraint, that's your advantage, your freedom, your inner power. Because when the world throws chaos at you and you stay still, it's not because you're numb. It's because you've trained your heart to listen deeper, trust better, and stay grounded. And that kind of quiet, it becomes your legacy. There comes a point in life when words just don't do enough. You've said all you could say. You've explained everything. You've cried the tears. You've begged to be understood. But they still don't get it. They still don't feel the weight behind your voice. When silence shows up, not as defeat, but as your final truth, because silence doesn't hesitate, it doesn't plead, it doesn't try to convince. It just is. Sometimes that silence carries more emotion than any words could. A silent walk away says, "I'm done." A quiet look can scream, "I'm hurting." No reply at all can whisper, "You hurt me more than you know." It's in those moments that silence becomes your message, your shield, your expression. You're not being cold, you're being clear, in the only way that's left, being present without words. Because sometimes people don't deserve to hear your voice anymore. They had your voice when it was full of love, full of hope, full of trying. Now they get your silence, not because you hate them, because your peace finally became more important than their understanding. And in that quiet, you finally start hearing yourself again. The voice inside, the one that always knew the truth, even when no one else did. Silence isn't the lack of communication. It's a higher form of it. It's what happens when words can't carry what's in your soul anymore. When someone breaks your trust, betrays you, or keeps ignoring your value, there comes a time when repeating yourself is too much. You realize you don't need to prove your worth to someone who refuses to see it. So you become silent. Stop defending yourself. You stop trying to correct how they see you. You let silence do the work, because silence is where your self-respect begins. It's where your healing takes root. When the tears dry up, when the anger settles, silence remains. Not as emptiness, but as something full. Full of lessons, full of boundaries, full of a strength you didn't know you had. In that silence, you become solid. It becomes your voice when your spirit is too tired to speak. It becomes your shield in a noisy world always asking, "Why don't you speak up?" And the answer is, you've learned that peace speaks softer than pain. That distance speaks louder than fighting. And silence, even though you can't see it, has a volume only the wise can hear. Silence makes people uncomfortable because they can't figure it out. They don't know what you're thinking. They're unsure of where they stand with you now. They feel that silence more than they ever felt your words. That's its power. You used to respond right away. You used to send long messages trying to explain yourself. You used to fight for closure. Now you say nothing, and that silence, it echoes. It fills the space. It stays with them. Because silence forces people to face the truth. You stop talking. They are left alone with their actions. No more back and forth. No more noise to cover the damage. Just quiet. And truth. Why silence scares the guilty? It makes them see what they've done. It shows them that your silence says more than your words ever could. And that truth, it stings. It's the result they never expected. You didn't block them. You didn't yell. You simply disappeared into your peace. And in that stillness, you found strength. In that silence, you found your closure, not because they gave it, but because you gave it to yourself. Sometimes silence is what love sounds like when it's tired. When you've tried everything, you've talked, cried, explained, but nothing changes. So instead of shouting, you go quiet. Not because you don't care, because you care too much to keep hurting in the same place. That silence becomes sacred. It's full of quiet prayers, silent tears, and strength you built in private. That's silence. It's not revenge. It's protection. It's what keeps your heart from shattering even more. It's what keeps your soul from drowning in being misunderstood. It's the final sign of self-worth when love stops listening. And if they ever really cared, they'll feel that silence in their chest. They'll remember your voice, your laughter, your love, and now the silence. And it'll stay with them. Not because you wanted to hurt them, but because you finally chose yourself. Because sometimes, kindest thing you can do is leave. In silence. No farewell words, no dramatic ending, just you picking peace. Tears in your eyes and a fire in your spirit that quietly says, I deserve more. Silence is often where true healing begins. In a world that constantly asks for attention, noise, updates, and quick reactions, choosing quiet is an act of strength, a quiet rebellion, a sacred rebellion where you decide not to feed the noise, not to act for approval, to shout your pain into a world that has already turned away. It's you making a choice that your healing is not for show. It's personal. Precious things grow in silence. Like seeds growing under the ground, like prayers softly spoken in the night. You don't have to explain your silence. Need to make excuses for your stillness. Let them wonder, let them talk, let them guess what went wrong. Your silence says everything. And in that calm space, you slowly reconnect with yourself. You begin to breathe with ease again. You begin to listen, not to the world, not to the doubters, but to the voice you pushed away for so long, your own. And once you hear that voice again, you realize how much you missed it, how often you gave it up for noise that never gave anything back. Now, you are feeding your soul with quiet, with healthy limits, with peace. That's not you giving up. That's a new beginning. That's growth. The kind of growth that doesn't announce itself but shows up later as a stronger, freer you. Soon, silence becomes your way of speaking. Not because you lost your voice, because you finally discovered it, and it no longer needs to shout. It doesn't have to fight. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply stands calm, true, and peaceful. You no longer chase closure. You don't argue with energy that doesn't meet your level. You simply let people feel the emptiness where your presence once lived. You let the silence say what words couldn't explain. And that silence, it starts bringing better into your life. Better friendships, better chances, better love. The moment you stop yelling your value is the moment the right people start noticing. You begin to give off an energy that doesn't ask for approval. Energy that speaks without sound. And that's the quiet beauty of it all. Silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of power, full of healing, full of truth. It's not where your story ends. It's where your next chapter begins. A chapter where your peace is your top priority. Where your limits are respected and your silence becomes your loudest voice. Because when silence speaks, the world pays attention. And when you learn to respect that silence, you start respecting yourself too. There comes a moment in life when silence becomes more than just a lack of noise. It becomes a message of strength, growth, and deep self-respect. You've been through the fire, when your name has been dragged through the mud, when your worth has been doubted, and your voice has been ignored. You learn that silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom covered in grace. You begin to see that speaking less doesn't make you less. It makes you solid. It gives you the space to think, to feel, and to protect what truly matters, your peace. Silence isn't running away. It's not hiding. It's a sacred break, a pause to choose purpose over reaction, to act with care instead of pride. It's knowing when to speak up and when to let your quiet say everything for you. There is real strength in staying calm while the world tries to pull you apart. There is dignity in walking away without a single word, without anger, without needing the last say. Because in that stillness, you aren't losing anything. You are taking everything back. You don't need to argue to show your worth. You don't need to explain your heart to people who choose not to see it. Let your silence reflect who's truly meant to stay. and who was never ready to walk beside you. It shows who is real and who is just noise, who is committed and who is just curious, who is true and who is only temporary. And in that quiet place where the noise disappears and the world grows still, you find yourself. You find a version of you that doesn't get shaken by drama, doesn't fall apart from betrayal, and doesn't beg to be understood. You find a soul that is stronger, wiser, and finally free. So hold tight to that silence. Value it. Learn it. Because once you do, you won't need to prove your strength. You will show it in the way you walk, in the way you look at the world, in your calm presence. And people will hear you clearly without you ever needing to raise your voice. Thank you for being here. May your silence bring you comfort. May your strength guide you onward. And may your soul always rest in grace. God bless you.